I make a motion to approve them.
Okay. Second? Okay, we good? Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Those minutes stand approved as submitted. That takes us to item number 4, trails, general plan, switchbacks, subdivision title 11 for recommendation to city council and planning. And this has been kind of on the council's plate for years that I'm aware of. I've only been here 3 years, but it's really come to a head with a couple things. One is the mitigation project, which has made some major trail enhancements, improvements to the trail, relieved a lot of the rutting, and put in water bars to protect the trail against erosion. So that's one thing. The other thing is the fire and avalanche and some natural occurrences have made parts of the trail, at least on a seasonal basis, unsafe for use. And the third item is that the building of the Taylor's home and their intent to enforce that easement, which does not permit motorized use other than by the city to access the tanks, that's going to be a continued concern in going forward. So we need to make some decisions regarding what is the trail use, what type of trail is it, and what is considered authorized use and motorized use. I prepared a document that actually prepared 2 years ago and never submitted it to the city council or to anybody, but then added a few items. Do you have copies of that? Okay, yes. And one of the things we've done just in the last few months is been working with Utah Valley Trails Alliance and kind of assessing how are trails used along the Wasatch Front. And at least for the past 15 or 20 years, motorized trail along the front country trails of the Wasatch have been really banned on public lands. Any kind of state, federal, or city lands on the Wasatch Front. Those front country trails are consistently non-motorized. And furthermore, Woodland Hills is really the only community, and I think we've checked a number of them, that the only community that allows motorized use on its city trails. So we kind of stick out like a sore thumb there in that regard. The water bars, protecting the water bars, we've noticed some damage there. So I think given all this, we need to come to some kind of consensus on what recommendation we should make to the city council for use of those trails.
Okay, Greg, can we just be specific that I think right now we're just talking about the switchbacks?
Exactly.
Because Woodland Hills classifies Woodland Hills Drive as a trail that has motorized vehicles on it. So right now, we're just talking about the switchback, which is really the only trail, dirt trail, other than Summit Creek in all of Woodland Hills. All these trails that are listed in the general plan
And
don't exist. They're on private land.
are Summit Creek trails considered city trails?
That's
Well,
yet to
Being
be
discussed,
determined.
I think, yeah. I'm not sure. It was HOA. I don't know if they,
But Summit Creek trails, I thought were considered city trails and are designated as non-motorized.
I'd probably say yes and no from conversations with Ben Brinley and residents there. And the proposed ordinance for Title 11 having to do with subdivisions. There's some things in there that we need to talk about tonight that perhaps are better worded in a development agreement than an ordinance. And one of those things is trails. Thousand Oaks had a development agreement with the city. And Thousand Oaks is the only community or subdivision in Woodland Hills that has trail easements that were defined in that development agreement.
We have Wayne on the call. Wayne, could I put you on the spot and ask you to maybe clarify when we talk about city trails, are Summit Creek trails considered city trails?
They're not. When Summit Creek was initially established, there was an expectation that the city would have use of the trails that they established there, but that never developed. And so the city has not had use of those trails. They're considered owned by the HOA, but there are discussions that we've had off and on over the past number of years about having those become available to the rest of the city. But right now, they are not.
Okay, so for the time being, as we're talking about city trails, we're talking about the Switchback Trail exclusively. Is that?
Pretty much so. Now, there are easements in besides Thousand Oaks in some of the city. I have an easement that goes down the back of my house that is designated for trail system, horse, and foot traffic, but those have never been developed. So, but there are different places around the city where those are recognized easements, but besides those in Thousand Oaks, but they've never been developed into trails.
Likewise, we have a trail easement along the west side of my property, but I asked about that, and someone said that that's not ever been enforced or raised or become an issue.
So Wayne, these undeveloped easements, they could be developed into trails if our committee wanted to do so and then present that to the city. I mean, they're there to be developed if people choose to do so, if the city chooses to do so.
That's correct. Yes.
Although at this point, I'm not sure that there's sufficient or any desire on the part of any residents to do that. I see John.
there's a lot of pressing areas they can spend money on.
Yeah. No, and I don't have any plans to cut a trail through my backyard. I've got enough trails.
You've already done it of your own accord.
Well, we were going to walk these to see, could they be potential biking trails, not dirt bikes, mountain bikes, pedestrian trails as they're designated in yellow on the map to be. And when I asked Jody, could she give me, am I walking across private property when we're going to walk these? The answer was no, the city didn't have anything like that. So we'd have to, I guess, Carrie said most of them run through private property that are on the east side of the city.
My my understanding is prior committee of some type, I think, came up with that. But I don't know who, where, or when.
Well, this is in the general plan that
Yeah.
the city approved.
Yeah, and again, they come up with the general plan, but,
Yeah.
but the implementation of it has not occurred because, you know, some of that stuff they don't have easements. It was just a concept, I guess would be, it's a conceptual plan.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that when the city revises and updates its general plan in the next year or two, that that might just kind of fall by the wayside? Would that kind of be the expectation?
No, I don't think so. The general plan is approved by the city council, so I think there's enough interest in the city, in trails in the city, or in trying to establish them, that I don't think that the trails is going to be removed from the general plan or fall by the wayside. I think it'll get some attention, and it obviously needs some, maybe needs some drivers to accomplish that, but I don't see it coming out of the general plan.
So Wayne, just to clarify the point, that is an easement. Those are easements, which means that even though they run on private property, the public could still use those right now. Is that right? Because it's an easement,
That's
even though
correct.
private property?
Yeah. You know, you get into an issue where, you know, the city wants to be responsive to its residents, and there's a sentiment that people don't want people unbeknownst to them walking on some of these easements. They're going through on the edge of their property, and so, you know, that's something that the city, I'm sure, is sensitive to. But yeah, there are easements there, and so individual residents in the city can trespass, so to speak, on those easements as trails, as long as they don't get off the easements and get onto the private property of the individuals.
Okay.
Well, guys, see, I don't think there's any particular change or recommendation we're going to make regarding the general plan or current easements beyond the switchback trail, right?
Well, I think with a little bit of work, we can hopefully come to an understanding with Summit Creek, and they would open what trails they do have to citywide use over there. I think that that's a good possibility.
Well, I think it is as well, but then we have to take into account parking, you know, for people to access those trails. I mean, I don't mind walking from where I live to go there, but somebody else might want to park. And then we're kind of in the situation where we are in deep forest. You know, how do we accommodate the parking of those residents, of anybody, Salem, Elk Ridge, whoever, because then they become public.
Well, that's right, and that becomes a whole nother issue, but that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of moving parts to these things, but that needs to be considered as a package. And if the city wants to use those, then what's the next step, and how do we work through the issues that we're faced with in using them?
So Wayne, I'm going to bounce back to a few months ago where we I don't remember which of the 100 meetings it was, but a comment was made about maybe doing an updated survey of city residents and tying that in with the planning commission sometime later this year and kind of just revisiting what are the priorities for the citizens, I guess. You know, is it roads? Is it this? Is it that? Whatever. I don't know if that's something that's still on the agenda, or at least somewhere to maybe try and do by the end of the year, because that could help answer some of this as far as priorities or what people are interested in.
I believe that.
Yeah, we would anticipate doing a survey as part of the update of the general plan. But I can tell you from the last survey that was done with the previous general plan, there was a lot of interest in trails in the city. So I don't see that diminishing. Again, it has its own challenges to work through, but there was a lot of interest in having trails in the city.
The community development group is probably going to be having a survey later this year. That might be.
No.
I think it's for commercial. I think.
Okay.
Is that commercial, Bob? Mainly?
That is bigger than commercial, but it's definitely commercial.
Okay.
It's basically looking at the economic viability of the city.
Okay. Which could encompass many things, yeah.
So the issue then, if we can focus this on the switchback trail, would be how is the switchback trail designated, motorized or non-motorized, and what constitutes authorized use on the switchback trail. You know, the information that we've assembled here and discussed would lead toward a classifying the switchback trail as a non-motorized trail. Any comments or concerns about that?
Bob, I'm going to pick your brain. Again, this is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong. So the water bars that have been installed, obviously your erosion control, most of that's been done at the request of DNR, the state, in lieu of the netting that we have up there for the easements, kind of the swap, right? Is that my understanding?
Correct.
We have an easement.
Well, they did have to get an easement to put that net up there.
I asked Carrie for a copy of it and I haven't received it yet.
Okay.
I asked Jody today too.
I'll have to ask Ted next time. So that's my understanding, Bob, is in order for them to let us put that on that, because that was state property, they wanted us to do X, Y, Z with the water bars. So my understanding is the water bars are our responsibility to maintain on an ongoing basis for whatever period of time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it behooves us to look at protecting those to some extent. I don't know. I mean, there's a cost involved if we have to maintain those or rebuild those, and whatever that cost is, the city bears that. So
I got a report from the fire chief that went up there, I guess it was last Friday. And he
headed that one up last Friday.
Yep, and they gave a very glowing report on the condition of the trail till you get to the avalanche area. They said the water bars are intact and in good shape, and that there's probably going to be a recommendation to open up the trail to motorized use shortly.
Okay. And how does that recommendation then fit in with the Taylors building the property, their home there, and the potential of that very, very soon being closed to motorized access?
How does their
I don't
easement
know.
with foot
It's the
traffic,
city's easement.
do they have,
Traffic's good.
do we have, but it's motorized specifically that their issue is?
The only motorized access
No.
supposedly is the city but pedestrian access is.
Yeah, that's what the easement states, pedestrian and water tank access only. But there is another way that we have made a recommendation. It's a recommendation, a proposal to the city. If the city deems and the citizenry deem that they want motorized traffic on the switchbacks, we have walked from Sky Lake up the other
Sky Lake and
access.
Brock Hollow,
Oh,
up there by
yeah,
Turner
yeah.
Child's place.
Yeah.
And that is being currently used, or it was until they started dumping all the dirt up there
Mhm.
by
For In-N-Out.
motorized vehicles. So there is another way
Yeah.
to get up there, but the city hasn't been very receptive to using that access, even though it's being used now, because you
Got
can
it.
see the tracks.
Well, it would take some work. They'd have to clear some trees and create a pathway because the city's property runs in between Baird's property and,
Machado.
Machado's.
Machado's
Yeah.
property. So there is a corridor there that could be improved to create a track for motorized vehicles.
The feedback that I've gotten is that the residents don't want it there.
And would we just open that gate?
That's not,
What?
that's
You
not,
gotta get the residents' approval first,
Gate?
don't you?
The gate's on Machado's property,
Oh, it is?
yeah.
but the city has property that comes right down to Sky Lake that can be used for motorized vehicles to access the trail. And
So,
then-
so my recommendation would be that we take, because I know this is a hot topic and has been and probably will be until we solve it. My recommendation would be on everything motorized vehicles for the switchbacks, we garner feedback from the community. And then we determine, is it possible, is it not? But if there's overwhelming support that says, yes, we want this, we want to keep this, then I think it behooves us as a committee to say, okay, let's see if we can make a way to do it. We work with the city. If it comes back and sentiment has changed, because I think years ago, the sentiment was, this is an ATV type community. We want to be, and people have done it, all of the reasons why may fly in the face of the research that's been done and so forth. But if the community wants it, I don't personally have a problem if we stick out like it, if that's what we want to help identify as a community and that's what the community wants, then I'd recommend we look as a committee to make that possible. If not, I personally will back down and say, hey, it's, I personally want that, but if I'm not in the majority, then okay, we'll support it. But rather than this committee, and I know we're not making the decision, but making more of a recommendation, my recommendation would be, here's some research we've done. Now have the city, or whether it's our committee or another, take and do a survey on specifically that topic and just get feedback. And let's see from there.
This is kind of bringing the issue to the forefront. I think what we're doing, and this is overdue for us as a community, in making this recommendation that it be non-motorized and leaving it up to 6 people on the city council to decide, and they decide yes, then our next step is to get a referendum where we would go around to every citizen and get their opinion and bring that back to the city council.
Yeah.
We involve everybody.
Yeah, I think that's the right play. Again, I would disagree with the findings just because of, as a committee, that's why I told you, I wouldn't as a committee member vote for that, but we work on majority and that's okay. So that's fine.
Because I see, well, at least 2 issues here, motorized versus non-motorized, there's issue 1. Issue 2 is access.
Yeah.
And regardless of what direction you go, if they can't get up to Dave Taylor's place and they want motorized, like they be in the masses, then there needs to be a plan B option of accessibility, which is kind of what this other one was thrown out. So anyway,
And
I'm not saying there's an
hopefully-
easy answer, but yeah.
Hopefully, the mitigation project, if that does go forward, isn't going to interfere with access from that side.
Right.
Then I mean, Corbett said the whole, not entrance, I forget his exact word, the trailhead is going to change if the mitigation project goes forward. So there's so many
Yeah,
moving
there
parts to this whole thing.
The other thing I'd want to make sure we considered, if we did make a change or even recommended a change to the general plan for trails being non-motorized, the fact that, again, a lot of the roads in Woodland Hills may be designated as trails currently. What I don't want this to do is become a slippery slope where all of a sudden now, what I feel like is even a bigger piece of Woodland Hills is the ability to ride machines back and forth in the neighborhoods here. That would concern me as well. Whether we go specifically for the switchbacks, or if we look further down the road and say, oh, well, Woodland Hills Drive is a trail and Eagle Nest is a trail and so forth is a trail, that significantly, I think, changes the way that Woodland Hills is currently set up, whether it be right or wrong. And to me, that would necessarily or absolutely require feedback from the city on that before we.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Brent, that you bring up. So how would that affect Woodland Hills Drive through Summit Creek? How would it affect, I guess it's Woodland Hills Drive that goes down through Four Seasons?
Because I think, yeah, I
Or
think
how
I think
could
the
it?
whole non-motorized, motorized, it might be worth taking a pulse of people, and I know it's specifically on the switchbacks now, but I mean that changes things quite a bit for a lot of people, I think, if that's the road we go. And I think part of the hang up we potentially would get on the switchbacks is because I think a lot of the other people would feel the same way I would feel, that they're nervous that we give an inch here and we lose a mile later on down the road with motorized, non-motorized. So I think
So
it's a
Doral
broader
and
topic
Bob and
potentially.
Wayne, how do we address that where we could get opinions on trails in general when the ordinance that's being proposed is really for the switchbacks? Well, no, it isn't either. It has to do with Title 11 and subdivisions, but the switchbacks are not excluded from that. How could we address that in a referendum? Because doesn't a referendum only oppose an ordinance that the city council passes?
Yeah, but I'd maybe take it out of the ordinance issue right now, and there's a lot of ways of doing surveys. You can do them on a computer, you can do them house to house, and do a survey on trails in the city and see what kind of feedback you get from individuals, and then use that feedback in any kind of a proposal that you might want to make. I think that an ordinance can still go forward. An ordinance is a general ordinance for trails and walkways in the city. In the ordinance itself, they don't need to be necessarily designated as motorized versus non-motorized. The same principles would apply whether it is motorized or non-motorized, with how the trail is treated and rules on trails and so forth. So, I don't see the holdup of switchback affecting a trails ordinance. It can be generic, and at a point in time, the city council can designate what they feel about particular trail being motorized or non-motorized. So
energy to charge back in it.
Yeah, I was just to that point where I was going to say, if the city is going to consider the trails in Summit Creek as a separate issue, could they not consider the switchback trail as a unique and separate issue and consider it accordingly, and not lumping it in with all the other trails?
sure, yeah, But I don't think you want one set of rules for certain trails in the system and another set of rules for another set of trails. I think that the rules should be generic enough, the policy should be generic enough that they would apply to any trail in the city, regardless of if that trail is designated as a motorized trail or a non-motorized trail. I think that
there are some specific characteristics that would lend a particular trail to a different viewpoint or a
No.
different way of.
I agree with you. Let me clarify. And that could be within the ordinance. These things are rules for motorized trail. These things are rules for non-motorized trail.
Okay.
But don't worry so much about designating in an ordinance which trail is going to be what. That can occur down the line a ways. So that's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
So right now, where are we in the city? The general plan says that all the trails are non-motorized.
No, it doesn't say that. The
Mm.
general plan doesn't say that.
The purpose of the City of Woodland Hills Non-Motorized Trails Master Plan. I'm reading right from the general plan.
Okay, there would be potentially non-motorized trails in the city. And some of those initially, when that general plan was done, several tens of years ago, it was envisioned that the trails in Summit Creek would be part of the master plan of trails in the city. As new subdivisions come online, that is attention that the city gives to those new subdivisions as far as a trail system. We ask them, we want trails in your subdivision. Where are you going to put them? Can they tie in to existing trails that we have in the city? So those things are discussed with a developer at the outset of a subdivision plan. That's the understanding we thought we had with Summit Creek, but it didn't really get formalized in the way that it should have gotten. So as Summit Creek continues to develop, those will be things that we'll be discussing with them and wanting to promote as part of a city-wide trail system.
Yeah, because they're on the map in the general plan as local trail. And then we have asphalt trails. And then all the others, including the switchbacks, are hiking and running on the map. So that's why I ask, where are we now in terms of motorized trails in Woodland Hills
The only,
or non-motorized?
we're not where we would like to be.
What if we did this? What if I put together a survey on motorized, non-motorized, and on whether, so we could ask some specifics around the switchbacks to motorized trails at all. Questions, I do this every day. If we had emails of everybody, it'd be easy to set up a survey. Obviously, everyone would approve it on the committee and say, yeah, change this question, change that question. At least we then get a pulse from everybody. Again, I don't know how it'll come out, but I think it's a topic that's probably important enough to most people that trails in general would make some sense. And if everybody were okay with that, I'd put it together, we'd adjust it, send it out, and then we'd have more of a basis of what we needed to do.
I concur. I want to get public involvement and opinions, and I have my personal preferences, but do we have within the city some kind of easy way Like, for example, on the alerts system,
I wonder if
Are there
that
surveys?
Everbridge option would be something we'd have to dig into that.
Yeah, Doral and Wayne and Bob, do we have, is there a distribution list at all that we could hit, or is that kosher? Is that okay?
There are good, efficient, and cheap ways to run a survey like this. Yeah, there's a lot of choices we have.
Yeah, we have a new tool called Everbridge, is that what it's called?
Everbridge.
That I think Jody would be able to give us guidance and direction on that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm getting the survey out.
Yeah, whatever way we could get just mass distribution. Again, like you say, multiple ways to create the survey. But if the big thing that we would need is just distribution, be able to get it out to people, and then I can create the survey, be it in Everbridge or Google Forms or Survey. I mean, there's a million ways we could do it. That would be my recommendation.
Well, can I ask, does a survey hold any weight
Question.
to city council? The biggest item on the last survey, what people requested to be done was to have our ordinances enforced. And we still hear that that's not happening. So if we do a survey, where's that going to go with the city council versus a referendum that they have to do something about? And if we get 51% of the people one way or the other, you have to abide by the survey that you've taken through the referendum, as opposed to just, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where are we going to?
First, you can't have a referendum if there's no ordinance. Second of all,
Well, do we?
you can't have a referendum if there is no ordinance that you're dealing with. Number one. Number two, referendums tend to be very adversarial, and so I would recommend that that's the path of least of last resort.
I would, Bob and team, you tell me if you feel this way. I would see the survey as simply a data point. It may change our recommendation. It may not. The survey may say we want motorized, and as a committee still may say, well, we still recommend no. But I would look at it as simply a data point in your decision making process.
I agree with that, and I would believe that that if we have faith in our type of government, that we would believe that a survey would play significant into the direction that the council would take, and that that the council would listen to what's being said there.
I agree with Bob. That would be that would be a huge influence on myself of what the public told us, the most of the public. We're not going to please everybody, but decisions that I see being made on the council are and should be made by the public that decides. That's why we have public hearings and try to accommodate what the public wants.
I agree with that in principle, I guess. There's a difference between listening to the will of the people and doing the will of the people. I mean, we all have an obligation to listen. We all do. What do the people want? What are they saying? But that shouldn't be necessarily the reason why we would vote yay or nay on an issue. The public doesn't have access to all the information that we do, that the city council does. But the public doesn't have access to these 15 points that Greg has put down. I mean, this was done with a lot of research. It took time. And, that's why we get paid the big bucks, is to make those tough decisions that sometimes run counter to the desire of the people. We have a right that we should listen to them, but that doesn't mean that we have to fall in line behind, the will of the.
I think
A lot of
Doral
times
made
it happens that way, but it should not be motivation for us to vote one way or the other.
I think that Doral made a good point, and that is that he would listen very heavily to what was said by the public. That doesn't mean that he's going to do everything that the public says. He's going to do what you've alluded to also, Jeff, and that is that he's going to look at the big picture. He's going to look at it as a whole and not with silos where you're just looking at just the public input or just a particular viewpoint or whatever that might be. I personally think that it's premature to even be talking about referendums at this point. I think that's very adversarial.
Another referendum that will just divide the
What-
city even further. That's terrible. Even there.
What I would recommend from this committee is, I think you would be good at writing up the format and details within the survey, because that is a big job in itself, is to figure out how to ask a question, not pushing one answer or the other. And in that survey, I would suggest you put a reason column for one side and an opposite side that someone could write for the other opinion. Because I think if you educate the public as much as we can during this survey, and it should be specific, I believe, not a mixed survey with everything else in the city, but just on the switchbacks, perhaps. This is what I would think. Get the people giving you input informed, get them informed on both sides of the issue, and then let's take their input. And Bob's right. It's just one input. This committee has input, the public have input, and each city council member seeks input from various sources. So, but the committee could play a big part in building a good survey, because you can build a survey that's bad, that only gets results that you're wanting to get, if you know what I'm saying.
I used to write or help write surveys in my work, and I would love to be able to kind of look at what you've got, Brett, and just kind of look at to make sure that we're going to get the answer we want, and not hidden answers that, and I don't mean leading answers, but the question will get us a clear answer and not a muted answer.
Yeah.
You know, you might give us thought also to sending a draft of that to each of the councilmen and women, because they're the ones that are going to make the decision, and they may want a question in a certain way that will help them go one way or the other. So just a thought as you put the survey together. If it were me, I'd send a draft to the council people and say, are there any questions that you feel that we've overlooked that you would like to have included here in order to help you when the time comes to make a decision? Just a thought.
That's a very good point, because collaboration and consensus create ownership, and ownership creates positive action.
As a committee now, we've put together, however you want to look at it, we put together one side of the argument. That's what we have in writing. But we would probably look to you and maybe someone else in the community who takes the opposite view and come up with a comparable list of.
And what we often, and I happen to live in the freest, most democratic country in the world, Switzerland, and they do referendums 4 times a year, federal, state, and city, and what they do is they present just in one paragraph, summarize kind of the arguments for, against, and then they have a simple question, and you vote yes or no.
Yeah.
Now we could expand on that and have maybe a scale. You know, what kind, and ask maybe 2 or 3 questions. but I think we can come up with a survey that, that gets at the heart of the issue and informs people, gets ownership from the residents, and be able to provide information to the city council that will drive a well-informed, appropriate decision.
Yeah.
So yes, I would favor a survey, and in fact, can I make that motion
I'll second that.
that we prepare a survey, and I don't have the technology, but Brett, whether it's on Survey Monkey or
A lot of
others.
different ways, yeah, we could do it. That won't be the important part, like's been discussed. It's the questions and it's the distribution. The format is super simple as far as, collection.
Well,
You
and
need to have
education
multiple choice and a Likert
educate-
scale.
to give an,
So the city won't take
What?
any action until we put together the survey and we actually put it out there.
I wouldn't guarantee that. As far as I understand, there's at least one member of the city council that believes the mayor's already given the go-ahead to open up the trail to motorized vehicles. I don't know that that's a fact, but that's one person's belief.
I think we were talking about chapter 11, the ordinance for subdivision.
Well, the issue to kind of keep in mind too, is that has always been a motorized trail as well as a non-motorized. So I think the thought was, let it be what it has been for 40 or 50 years, instead of change it now and then change it back in 2 months or whatever, but just let it be, see how it goes with some of the changes that have been made, leave it as it is. And in the meantime, do the survey and see where things, anyway, I know the group is well intentioned, but I'm saying that has been a motorized trail for probably, as long as the city's been here. So keep that in mind too. And I think rather than trying to upset the apple cart, so to speak, and cut it off now from being a motorized trail, my view is that you're better off just let it be as it has been for years and years. Do the survey and come back with the recommendation then to the city council on it.
And would that include equestrian too? Because it's been equestrian for years and years.
Sure, why not?
Yeah,
Well, then you really have damage to the water bars.
I
According
think
to the
that-
mayor, horses do more damage than motorized vehicles
Yeah,
do.
by far, we do.
I think that
Wait,
the trail,
I understand the historical use of that trail, going back to mining days, has been a motorized trail. But there are two things that I think kind of force maybe a different look at that, different decision now. One is that the trail access that we currently have is going to be closed off to us because it's on private property. And secondly, is there has been consistent abuse, and we've seen pickup trucks, and Sherry could probably tell you all kinds of horror stories, and it's not local users. So maybe the answer is close to motorized use, but there is authorized motorized use. For example, maybe give certain individuals a permit within the city, but we don't want to make it published on all trails as a motorized trail.
why don't you just let the city deal with that like they have for 50 years and get through the survey and see where we go from there.
Wayne has a good point. The only rebuttal to that I can see would be that, well, Kansas City is now getting large enough that there are so many people going probably gonna.
Kathy, I think your phone's not on mute.
Well, the biggest change I see is that people are gonna trespass
Are they trying?
private property to get to
I
that trail.
I don't
Can you
think we're gonna
guys,
talk
Glenn
about
and Kathy, can you hear us?
stuff.
Yes.
Are you trying to chime in or are you just talking?
Oh, I was just talking to Glenn.
Okay. We didn't hear you say anything bad about us, so that's good.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, well,
So who to do the survey? I don't have to do the survey and I don't want, I mean, I'm happy to do a first run of it and then we just add.
We
it
need to
back
start
and forth.
somewhere. The survey, we need to start somewhere.
I don't have any expertise in survey design, but I've seen enough surveys and I can probably study up a bit and work together with you, Brett, or anyone else to create a survey and.
Okay,
I think the important thing is to get the other side.
yeah.
That's the important thing. Then we can mechanically put it all together. We need-
I
Yeah.
think it's
Get the
important
other
for the
side.
big picture. I think we want to get the big picture. I think we want to know all aspects of the use, of its potential use, of its of the desires of the community, whether it's for or against. I think we need to have the big picture of it. And I don't know that we need to be looking to design the survey to get one side or the other. I think that is a poorly designed survey.
But if you don't give people reasons to take a position, then they're just shooting from the hip. You know, they're relying on old ideas that have fermented through the years. You got to educate them and then let them make an informed decision. Like we talked about earlier, I think you got to have some pros, cons. Otherwise, people are just going to trust their gut and.
Sure, you
I
ask
mean,
questions.
That's not a decision, I don't.
You ask questions in a manner that will draw out both sides. And so you'll know where people have come from. I don't think that we want to over control people's beliefs on how they think the trail should be used. I think we want to understand what people want. Then we balance that with the data that Greg's put together and try to make the best decision that we possibly can. I think the purpose of the survey is not to sway people one way or the other, but to have a belief, an understanding of what it is that they what they want, what they think our city should do and how it should use the trail.
And I don't think anyone here is proposing a biased survey.
No.
So let me throw out a scenario because this is something I see. At this point, for instance, again, this is just a hypothetical with our group here. And you ask the question, do you want motorized or non-motorized? Pretty vague, open-ended question. But now I'm going to modify that a little bit with the circumstance I see here. Are you for motorized or non-motorized if you cannot access it anymore off Deep Forest because Dave Taylor's going to enforce the easement that he's given the city, which is non-motorized. And in order to access it, you're going to have to come from either point A or B, which is not Deep Forest, whether it's Broad Hollow. So all of a sudden I could see people's opinions changing if all that data is given to them of, okay, if it's not just motorized and non-motorized, it's if you want motorized, it may have to come from a different point. Are you still okay with that? Does that make sense? That may change somebody's perspective. So I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful
Uh-huh.
in the facts that you present. For
Correct.
example, the city has used this trail system for over 20 years. That makes a prescriptive easement. That makes it allowable for people to cross wherever they've been crossing for the last 20 years to access that trail system. So you don't want to mislead people and say, he's going to cut off the access and you're not going to be able to use it anymore. That may not be reality. So you've got to be careful, again, in wording questions so that you're not misinforming people at the same time you're trying to properly phrase the question.
Let me do this. Let me start with a survey with just questions. And then let's start there. Let's see if we can do a survey with just questions. Again, I will try to put any bias I can aside, and let's just start with questions, and then we can adjust the questions from there. That's what I would recommend. I would be skeptical of a survey if data was presented to me as well, because then I'd feel like I had to go do my own research if I didn't already have an opinion, and I think it just convolutes it. I would say let's just see if we can come up with questions that get the types of answers that will help the city council to be able to at least have a data point.
Yeah.
And everyone will have input. We won't send it until
3 or 4 questions, or?
I would say 20 or less at maximum,
Okay.
or we'll lose
Okay, yeah.
people, right? And my goal will be 10, right? And I mean, if it's only the switchbacks, then certainly we could do 10 or less, certain of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll craft them. I'll get them to people here next 2 or 3 days. And we can start to review, and then I think if the city council, again, do I need to check with Jody on distribution? We can get to that when we get to that point. But
Yeah, because not
Okay.
everybody's on Everbridge. Well, I liked what Bob said about use. It isn't just motorized, non-motorized, or equestrian, or pedestrian. Do you want the trail open to be used 24/7?
right.
And not 7, but 24 hours, where we've got people going up there in the dark.
And I
It's
think
use all the way around, and how do you enforce it? That's a big problem in our city. How do you enforce it?
The
Well,
more controls you
craft
put, the
these-
more effort is to control it.
I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't hear you.
The more restrictions you put, the harder it is to control it, to enforce it.
That applies to anything.
so. One request I would, if you have questions you would like to ask, save me from trying to send them to me, and let's think of some questions. I'll think of some. Let's just put it together and come up with a
Would you
consensus.
imagine yes or no questions, or kind
Some
of
of, some
a
of both,
scale?
depends on the questions.
1
Depends
to
on the
7
questions.
scale, or?
It just
Yeah,
depends on the question. You can form it. But
Okay.
again, if you would just send me things you want to know, or things that you think would be important questions, then we can start there, and I'll build from there.
And
Well, I can give you the questions that the planning commission asked 5 or 6 years ago in the general plan. Want to take a look at those and maybe,
Yep, we don't need to reinvent the wheel for all of it, so. that'd be
Yeah.
good.
okay.
Okay, good. Can we move on to lighting ordinance?
Before we go there, can we go to what the city council and planning asked us to do with regards to chapter 11, title 11, the ordinance for trails, hiking paths, and walkways? And what kind of proposal do we want to make in regards to this, if any? I like what Wayne has said to me in the past. When you think about crafting an ordinance, you think how you're going to enforce it. And there's things in here such as littering. You have to pick up your own litter. Your dogs need to be on a leash. If there's designated parking areas, how are these things going to be enforced? Use of any path, trail, or walkway may be controlled by curfew hours at the direction of the city council. How is that going to be enforced? And who enforces it?
That's why it says may be and not shall be.
Well, a lot of perhaps what's in here is open-ended. I mean, is it time to have this discussion? So we're done with it? That, you know, when people are parking after dark and then I'm going to use the switchbacks because that's the only trail we have, and the sheriff gets called because they're parking, are they even supposed to be up there? If they're not allowed to park, what are they doing up there? So a lot of the things in here are open-ended that perhaps need to be, have some definitive things put to it, not to over prohibit anybody, or else delete them altogether. And some of them, I think, belong in a development agreement, not in an ordinance. Having to do with the HOA, these things should be worked out in a development agreement, not through an ordinance, is my suggestion, or my suggestion to the committee, that should these things be considered in a development agreement, and we don't have any right now. There is no development agreement with Summit Creek. There is none with Four Seasons. We don't have any.
Let me add a little bit there, Sherry. There is a development agreement that is being crafted by Summit Creek right now, and it will eventually materialize with the city and Summit Creek. But the development agreement establishes trails, but the ordinance and it's a different process. The ordinance guides how the trail is to be used, the restrictions on it, if any. None of that really is in a development agreement. There could be a few things in the development agreement with an understanding that the city has with the HOA. But once a trail is established, then it becomes an ordinance issue to further guide how that trail is used. So it might be a while before we get there, but I just wanted to separate the two, because a development agreement is over with once the development is done. Then it falls to the ordinance to give the direction to whatever the matter is, and enforcing or establishing guidelines.
Gary, to that point, I'm all for having, if it were at a broad level, some, I don't know the right word, but provisions for the trails, right? So if we had, for example, a curfew on the trails, okay, great. Do you need to be on the switchbacks at 1 a.m.? I don't know what, you know what I mean? If there's a curfew for the trails, if there's, like we've talked before, if there's a seasonal use for motorized vehicles, common sense would say we don't send motorized vehicles up the switchbacks when it's muddy and snowy and soupy. That's when it does the damage. So I think things like this, you could potentially put across all trails. And if we designated different types of trails in Woodland Hills and said, okay, pedestrian trails are open, and it doesn't have to be custom for each one, but I don't think that's unreasonable. And then it could apply across. I don't love having people on the trail right above my house at 1 a.m. and I get them all the time. It gets my dogs going crazy and they're doing things they shouldn't do, right? It'd be nice to not necessarily have them doing that if we decided that were important.
Could I interrupt the discussion for a minute, because I need to leave? The reason why I got on was to inform you that we received a grant for Woodland Hills Days. We didn't get as much as we wanted. It's only $3,000, but we add that to the $10,000 that's been budgeted. So we now have $13,000 for Woodland Hills Days, and we are still looking for co-chairs. So any recommendations you have, I appreciate sharing them with us. That's all I have. Thanks for letting me interrupt you.
And that's September, Bob, is that right?
Yeah.
September 10 and 11.
Okay.
Okay.
Kind of threw us off, sorry. I'm done.
I was thinking about Woodland Hills Days. So do we want to planning has graciously put off their public hearing and their recommendation for Title 11 to the city till they got input from us, because the city council had asked us to give input particularly on the switchbacks and on the ordinance and to poll other cities and the city council will be having their public hearing on Title 11 after planning makes their recommendation, which will probably be, when's your meeting, Wayne? A week from Wednesday or?
Yeah, it's the third Wednesday.
So I think we need to,
If we're gonna do it. we
if
need
we're
to
going to do it, we need to do it. And
Well, we're too late to include it in June because we have to give advance public notice. So maybe if I could make a suggestion, if you all as a committee could look at the proposed ordinance, and it is not an all-encompassing ordinance. It's meant to replace a couple of paragraphs that we have in our existing city code having to do with trails and walking paths. So if you could look at it and tell us what you think, yeah, it's fine for right now, we're good with it, or we really have concern about this matter or that, or why don't you add a section that addresses this? Give that feedback to us. And in July, we can further consider that, and at least get a semblance of an ordinance on the books, more than what we have right now, if you feel that that would be good to have some things in place as we go forward. And again, it's not meant to be an end-all ordinance. It's to replace what we have, which is very little, and try to establish some guidelines for generic trail use, and that would include Summit Creek trails as well. The city would be bound by those who've already talked to them about some of their restrictions, and they don't have a lot, but this criteria would apply to city use of those trails in Summit Creek also. So not that you have to do it tonight, but give a look at that and then give me some feedback on what you think about it.
okay,
Okay.
Do we have a
We'll do that.
PDF of the old and the new?
I will resend that to everybody.
The one you sent, is that the new? That's the proposed, right? I believe.
Yeah, it's just two pages in the little
Yeah.
bit at the end. That's the proposed.
Okay,
I can send you the current one as well,
that'd
the
be
one
great.
that's on the books right now.
It'd be good that way I'd just like to look at two side by side.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay, so on to the lighting ordinance.
Lighting ordinance, yeah, or lighting
And-
recommendation.
So council asked us to consolidate this more. Is that what I understood?
Well, planning looked at
Or planning,
it.
I
We
mean,
haven't heard
sorry.
anything from council.
Okay,
Planning
so-
thought it was a little lengthy.
Okay, so
And-
to consolidate.
I really liked Severin's comment that he didn't really get anything till he got to the pictures at the back.
The pictures do say a lot. Pictures worth 1,000 words, so yeah, I would agree with
No
that.
wonder we get along so well.
We spent time
A
on
lot,
this.
yeah.
The the Natural Resources Committee, putting this together and looking at it and trying to make something, Wayne, that perhaps might be an ordinance, to enhance the ordinance that we already have a little bit in terms of lumens and wattage and facing downward. I think that's one aspect of it for us as Parks, Trails, Recreation. And the other is to try to get something in place to be included in the building permit package, where perhaps the document that we've presented could be used in that, so that when the permit is issued, people are in compliance with lumens and downward lighting. And interesting today, when I was walking up Eagle's Nest, I got to a certain piece of property and they've put up a 20-foot pole that has two bright lights on it that shines either in their garden or their basketball court. I'm not sure which. It's huge. We're getting bigger and we're trying to protect the night sky. We're not asking people to turn their lights off. So I think that's where we're coming from. So I'd like for the committee to get some feedback from you as to kind of what you're really looking for from us, because I know it was long.
Yeah, 19 pages long.
Oh, no, it's not.
So we are looking to what do we really need? Helper has done one. It's like, seems like it was 6 pages. So apparently they've accomplished the same thing for as to Dark Sky that Tory did in 19 pages. Just a comparison. I haven't gone through and compared the two ordinances and looked at them, but
The one I have here is 9.
Yeah, that's the one I said.
Because Tory's was longer. This one's 9.
yeah, that may be Helper. I don't.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that's more in that realm.
Wayne, are you looking more for, as a philosophical kind of document, or do you want less specifics? More, what are you looking for? A point of view, more general?
I'm looking for what do we really want? I think Tory had a lot of philosophical stuff in it a little bit. We don't need that. We want to be very direct. We don't have to say why we're doing this in an ordinance. Just like old Jack Webb used to say, just the facts. So just the detail. What kind of lighting lumens are acceptable to the city? Where is lighting to be placed? Those sorts of things. Anything that can be done to streamline what you have. And I got to think there's quite a bit of room to streamlining it a little bit. So
I think we can do that. I think the intent here is to make this a positive kind of thing,
Yeah.
to identify who we are and our quality of life and values. And when we start talking about lumens per acre and getting very specific, it just becomes kind of onerous and not much fun. And I'd like to make this enjoyable.
Well, we focus on what we can do rather than what we can't do.
Yeah.
I think we can make an intent paragraph as to why we're looking to do that. But it shouldn't take more than a paragraph to hit the high spots to help people understand why the benefit of the restrictions that are being placed on them in their building process.
When would you want this? By which date?
We're flexible, and there's no doubt that our existing ordinances needs work. I mean, but the sooner the better, because we've got new building, and if we want these builders, the new homes, to comply with these new lighting standards, then that needs to be in place as an ordinance to do that. So it kind of falls back to you all and what you're doing. I know that to get a Dark Sky approval is a long and lengthy process, but the sooner that we can have these lighting guidelines or restrictions in place, the better off the city is and in that process also.
I think up with a simplified, pared down guidelines within the next 4 weeks. It's early in the month, by the end of June, let's come up with.
Would by the end of June let you deal with this in July?
Yes.
Okay. Consider it done.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
I can move on to item 6 and the Woodland Hills Outdoors. We did receive the grant, which was great news because it was a very competitive grant. I think there was, can you remember the numbers, Dora? I think there were grant applications for $14 million and only a pool of $4 million available. Anyway, we received the full amount, a small grant. It's a $10,000 grant that will, on a matching basis, deliver a $20,000 project, which is primarily fencing around the mitigation lot and the park. I've been talking with Craig and others to actually detail out where that fence is, and I would hope to be able to start within the next few weeks and start by getting the fencing in. We also have a group of teachers up there this evening that are rerouting the disc golf course. And I was out with.
Caught ground on my way in. And,
Okay, great.
He was pulling wheelbarrows
Yeah.
off his truck.
So that's all part of the grant proposal too. Okay.
Will that fence go, we don't have to get into it, but it'll go around the whole park? I can't remember.
No,
Just the front?
no, just basically from your house. In fact, there's a steep slope
Yeah.
right next to your house, but it takes off just beyond that
There it goes.
and goes over to the mitigation channel. And the intent is to kind of close off the park, keep ATVs from driving through the park, and then to protect the mitigation channels too. So that's the.
Work.
Will that help to
Work
keep
on that.
people away from your neck of the woods, do you
Some of
think?
the activities are occurring by him, the fences are
Yeah,
gonna change.
It's okay.
Just give them a
Promiscuous.
place to hang things, maybe?
Yeah, don't even go there.
Sorry.
Greg, if I might, that fence needs to have a site plan done and forward into the city for, the planning commission approves all the fences, so don't overlook that step.
Okay, we've already prepared in fact, part of the grant application included a site plan, a landscape architectural drawing. I can forward that to you. And yeah, we'll
Yeah, whatever you have on it, a description of the fence and everything, you can send it to Jody. She coordinates all that, but that would be good.
okay. I will get you, Wayne. Thank you.
And Greg, does this include fencing around the mitigation pit?
Yes,
Okay,
lower mitigation lot as
Lower-
well.
okay.
Fence along the west side of the mitigation channel that runs through the.
I meant on the upper hill side of Eagle Nest. Isn't there
Yeah.
fencing planned for up there too?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that in the plans, but I'm sure it was.
In fact, I'll forward
Okay,
the site plan, the landscape architectural drawing that shows where the fence is.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that'll look nice up there.
Okay. Bob had a comment about Woodland Hills Days, September 11th, and we'd like to get a committee together to propose some ideas and what we want to do for that. I don't know what role we'll have. I think Bob has been pretty much in charge of that. But we will be meeting and coming up with some ideas for Woodland Hills Days.
When we set up the subcommittees in the beginning, didn't we have a subcommittee for that? Kathy's not on it, she's gone, but I think
there was
Kathy Anderson.
over kind of those activities, yeah.
was on
Yeah.
it.
Yes, that kind of falls under in our wheelhouse. So
I mean,
recreation,
let me throw an
community
idea-
events.
Just an idea. years and years ago, Marianne and I did a race for Woodland Hills Days. We called it Loafer Buster. And we did, it might be kind of fun where we're trails and committee. We had people from all over that came that morning to do the race. We could do it just in Woodland Hills, but they used to do the Yeti. They used to do
Yeah,
the
the
Yeti
Yeti.
race, which was kind of fun. It might be
Is this
Might
like
be
a
fun.
steeplechase or is it like a 5K?
just a race. No, it's like a 5K. It's
Okay.
like a 5K, and
Just wanted
we've
to
got so
check.
many different ways we could incorporate trails or roads, and people show up for stuff like that. We had shirts; they still wear them. Anyway, might be something that this committee could
Yes,
do.
Well, the
just to do
Yeti
it.
included at the switchbacks, didn't it?
Yeah,
Because
which
Dave
that time
Taylor
of
was
year might be
building.
kind of fun. They did it in the
I
snow.
can't tell you how many
Yeah.
people I've talked to have said, we ought to do the Yeti again. They're still talking about that.
Dave
Yeah,
Taylor won the Yeti for, I heard, 5 years. The
Wow.
guy who's building up Deep Forest.
But yes, I'd love to have some kind of event around.
you could have a short one around the. You could do a race around the park for the kids, just on the asphalt trail around, like, the short one with some prizes and shirts if they signed it, people will pay for it. And then you could do another, the Yeti or whatever we wanted. But anyway, I think that might be a good fit for the trail committee to say, hey, we're
Yeah.
putting on the races for it. You got the short one for the kids and it's good.
I'd like to see a timed event up and down the switchbacks.
I know. I know.
And perhaps Dark Sky can do something
Yeah,
at Woodland Hills Days too.
that night. Yeah, I like that.
Get a little band playing Twinkle Twinkle and anything having to do with stars.
There you go.
Okay, any other items to consider, to bring up? If not, we'll
I make a motion, we adjourn.
to adjourn.
Second that.
Okay, seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Doro.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Bob.